This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Bruchim Abam to the Kol Agad Perka here in Kew Garden Hills, New York. This is the Shiur before the 3 weeks, before the Vein HaMetzarim. Tomorrow already is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And I want to discuss the Gemara and Brachos on Daf Ches Amud Aleph. Now brace yourselves for this year. The information that's contained this year is likely to be very jarring. It's information that we're not necessarily familiar with, and it's really mind-boggling material. So Gemara says in Masechta Brachos, Va'amar Abaye, Meireish hava garisna b'goy beisa. I used to learn in my house, Matzilna b'bei knishta, daven in the shul. Kivan d'shamana. But when I heard Lahadamar Rav Chia Barami Mishmei Deula, Miyoim Shecharav Beis Hamikdash, from the day the temple was destroyed, Ein Lo Ilaha Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamai, all God has in His world, Ela Arba Amay Shel Halacha, only the 4 cubits of Halacha, Bilvad, alone, Lo Hava Matzlina, I only davened Elahecha de Garisna, where I learned. An amazing statement. That from the time the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, from the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the only thing God has in this world are the 4 cubits of halacha. That implies that before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, God may have had many things. It sounds like the area, the realm of halacha was bigger than Daled al Daled, but miyom shechar Beis Hamikdash, the area that occupies halacha is only Daled Amos. So here's the first question. Why do we call the area that halacha occupies Arba Amay Shel Halacha? I think we tend to think that that's the amount of space that a person occupies, which is completely not factual. Does anybody know how much space a human being occupies? Well, let's look at Hilchos Sukkah. In Hilchos Sukkah, a sukkah has to be 6 tefachim by 6 tefachim plus an additional tefach for the table, because the Gemara says that a human being occupies 1 amma. Why an amma? Well, basically, a human being occupies 6 tefachim, and then the 7th tefach is for the sukkah, and the Achronim even ask, so make the sukkah 6 by 7. No, you need to be able to put the sukkah in any way. That means a human being occupies 1 amma by 1 amma. So what in the world does the Gemara mean that Ein Lo Ilaha Kadosh Baruch Hu Ela Arba Amay Shel Halacha? Only a person that weighs 3,000 pounds would occupy Daled Amos. Nobody occupies Daled Amos, not them and not their table. If they have a massive table and they happen to be the size of Oig Melech HaBashan, maybe you could say, Ein Lo Ilaha Kadosh Baruch Hu. What does the Gemara mean? Ein Lo Ilaha Kadosh Baruch Hu Ela Arba Amay Shel Halacha. Arba Amay Shel Halacha. That's 2 amos by 2 amos. 4 feet by 4 feet. Who occupies 4 feet by 4 feet? A sukkah doesn't even have to be that big. Why do we use the expression Arba Amay Shel Halacha? Where does that come from? We know there's a very unusual phenomenon in Shas, where we'll have a Mishnah, and the Gemara will have a kasha. I don't understand, what does the Mishnah mean? And the answer will be Chisurei Mechsara V'Hachi Katani. The Mishnah is missing words. This is what it means to say. Now, if we would only encounter this phenomenon one time, okay, Chveis, Rabbi overlooks something, but this is a repetitive phenomenon. This is something that repeats itself again and again and again. Chesurei, Mechsara, V'Hachi, Katani. What does that mean? Imagine if you're writing a composition, and you're back in high school, and you're supposed to submit 500 words, you submitted 100 words, and the teacher says, Was geht done? So what do you mean? Chesurei, Mechsara, if it's good enough for Rabbi, should be good enough for you. What is this? It seems like a procedure. It's a methodology. The way Rabbi wrote the Mishnah was Chisurei Mechsara V'Hachi Katani. Now, there are many, many different Perushim. We've said many Perushim over the years. You have the Tfaras Yisrael and Erechin. Tfaras Yisrael says, the Gemara says at the end of Megillah, Kol Hashoina B'Loi Zimra, that you have to learn Mishnayos with a niggin. Now, anybody who's familiar with music knows that sometimes you got to fit the words into the beat. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, in order to fit the words of the Mishnah into the beat, sometimes he had to leave out words. That's what the Tfaras Yisrael writes. But we're going to explore today another possibility. Why does Rabbi write the Mishnayos in this style of Chisurei Mechsara V'Hachi Katani. Let's talk about the crown of the Jew. What is our crown? We make a bracha every day. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam oiter Yisrael b'sefara. The Rosh says, the Rosh would make this bracha on the tefillin shel Rosh. So the minhag to be yimashmesh b'tefillin shel Rosh when you make the bracha oiter Yisrael b'sefara. The tefillin is considered our crown. Now, if you take a look at the tefillin, you'll notice that on the two sides of the tefillah shel Rosh, you have a shin on one side, a shin on the other side. What in the world are these shins doing there? Why the letter shin? Why is there a tefillin on the shel Rosh? What is the significance of the shin? Moreover, we know that the two shins are different. One shin is a three-headed shin. The other shin is a four-headed shin. What is the meaning of these oisiyos that are etched onto our tefillin shel Rosh? Mo'er Rabbi say, the first Mishnah in Masechta Pesachim. Oyer li'arba asar, on the night of the 14th, boid ginas hachametz la'or haner. You check for leaven by the light of the candle. Kol makom she'ein machnisim by chametz. Any place that we do not bring chametz into, ein tzarech v'dika. You don't have to check. So a place that you don't bring chametz, you don't need to check. Says the Mishnah, so regarding what did they say, 2 rows in the cellar? Huh? That's like random. What do you mean? With regarding what did they say, 2 rows in the cellar? Whoever mentioned cellar that you're asking, and regarding what did they say, you have to check 2 rows of the cellar. If the Mishnah would say, Tzarech livdaik shtei shuros b'martev, uvama amru be, it's like the most random non sequitur you could ever encounter. Uvama amru be shuros b'martev. Nobody said a word about the martev. It's such a oddly written paragraph here. All the Mishnah said so far is any place you don't bring in chametz, you don't need bedika. What do you mean uvama amru? All of a sudden the Mishnah is a toisvis. The Mishnah is asking questions. And regarding what did they say? Who's they? What do you mean they? Who's the they? Uvama amru, regarding what did they say? Who's the they exactly? Since when do we refer in the Mishnah as to they? What does the Mishnah mean? This is the kasha of the Shlach HaKadosh. Who said anything about the cellar? Uvama amru beishurais b'martev. What does the Mishnah mean? And even if you only learned a small part of Pesachim, maybe you got up to the 4th line, right? Uvama amru beishurais b'martev. Don't make fun of my yeshiva. Yeah. So we say at the end of Shemona Esrei, Yiratzeh milfanecha, Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, she'yibana beis hamikdash b'mher v'yameinu. May it be your will that you rebuild the beis hamikdash speedily in our days. V'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha, and give us our share in your Torah. V'sham navarcha, and back to the mikdash, and we'll serve you over there. Also random. Hashem, rebuild the Beis HaMikdash and give us our share in your Torah. What does you giving us our share in your Torah got to do with the building of the Beis HaMikdash? We don't need a Beis HaMikdash to give us a share in the Torah. Baruch Hashem, there's a big Torah out there. And today, the Torah is even more accessible than ever. It used to be when I was a kid, there was only 1 volume of Masechta Shabbos. Nowadays, already 4 volumes of Masechta Shabbos. 1 star Shabbos, 2 stars Shabbos, 3 stars, 4 stars, right? Every blot has 33A, 33B, 33C, 33D, right? So what do you mean V'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha? How many volumes are there explaining Baruch Hashem? You have Masifta Gemara, you have Biurei Rashi, Biurei Tosfos. Anybody can learn a Tosfos today. You have Penine Chasidus on every blot of Shas. What are we asking? Rebuild the Beis HaMikdash and give us our share in your Torah. L'chaira, the Torah is very accessible. It was never lacking. Was never diminished. L'chaira, it's not related to the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Why do we daven Sheyabana Beis HaMikdash V'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha? In fact, one of the well-known stanzas in the Slichos, we talk about our diminished state compared to the former glory of the Jewish people. We say Hoyer HaKodesh v'Hamachayzos. We say in the Ilah. We say in Slichos. The holy city and its villages. Hayu lecherpo levisais. Was ashamed, was embarrassed. V'chol machamadeha. All of her treasures. The Aron, the Kruvim, the Mata of Aron, the Tzintzenes Haman, the Shemen Hamishcha, Tvuos are all buried. Genuzos are hidden. Ve'ein Shiur rak haTorah hazos. The only thing we remain with is the Torah. Is the Torah. So what's the pshat? What's the pshat? So Eitz Yosef says, look at the commentary of Eitz Yosef. Yosef, Ratzalaymar. Ve'ein anachnu kadaim shetivna alanu beis hamikdash. We say, Ribbana Shalom, build the beis hamikdash. And if we're not worthy, at the very least, al kalpanim sen chalkeinu b'sarasecha, b'chal haloi medine karbanos. And if you learn about the building of the beis hamikdash and the different sacrifices, have a kilu hikrivam, it will be considered as if we brought them. In other words, first we ask for the charchila, and if not, we will settle for the b'diavad. Rebuild the temple, and at the very least, allow us to learn. So this way, if we learn, we have some semblance of connection to the bringing of karbanos and the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. But we're going to explore another possible peirush in this tefillah, Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash Meher V'Yameinu B'Sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha. A couple years ago in the summer, we had a schus to learn Mishnayos Masechta Tamid, Masechta Midos, the good old days. If you look toward the end of Masechta Tamid, the second to last Mishnah, the penultimate Mishnah of Masechta Tamid. Now, what's the last Mishnah in Tamid? The last Mishnah in Tamid is Hashir Shahayu Halavim Oimrim V'Veis HaMikdash V'Yom HaRishon Hayu Oimrim L'Hashem ha'aretz u'moya, b'masheni ha'yoimrim, Gada Hashem hula ma'oid, b'Shabbos ha'yoimrim, mizmar shir l'yom ha'Shabbos. That's very interesting, just as a side note. One of the original printings of all Svarim, especially Tehillim, was the Cincino edition of the Tanakh. Cincino had a very interesting chidush, and Cincino's chidush was that the koiseres of a chapter of Tehillim was not really part of the chapter. So, for instance, he would say Mizmar Shechanugas V'Asa David or Mizmar LeDavid. That's not part of the Tehillim. That's not a separate pasuk. It's the heading. It's the title of the chapter. So you say, what's a nafkamina? Big nafkamina. So, for example, in the Sefer Pachad Yitzchak of Rabbi Yitzchak Lamprunti, he talks about, let's say somebody made a neder, they're going to learn or read 10 psukim a day. Does it count to say L'David Mizmar? Or does it count to say Mizmar Shechanugas David? Or is that just the heading? So the opinion of Cincino was that the Kaiseres was not a pasuk. The only Kaiseres that he counted was Mizmar Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. That was a pasuk. So the Nachlas David brought a raya to this from the last Mishnah in Tamid. B'Yom HaRishon Ha'Oimrim L'Hashem Ha'aretz U'Mloya. What do you mean L'Hashem Ha'aretz U'Mloya? That's not how it starts. It starts L'David Mizmar. On the second day, it doesn't start Gadol Hashem. How does the second day start? Mizmar Shir. Mizmar L'Vnei Korach. Mizmar. Lam Natseach, Lamnei Karach Mizmar. Why does he start? The answer is because the heading is not part of the Tehillim. But B'Yom HaShabbos Ha'Yoimrim Mizmar Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. So actually his edition of Tehillim supported this idea. Anyway, back to Mishnayos Tamid. The second to last Mishnah, Mishnayos Tamid, it says like this, Zehu Seder HaTamid La'avodas Beis Elokeinu. This is the order of the Karban Tamid for the service of the house of our God. Yehi Ratzain Sheyibane B'mheira V'Yameinu. Amen. Comes the Be'er Sheva, and the Be'er Sheva has the following question. What in the world is this Mishnah doing here as the second to last Mishnah of Masechta Tamid? The Be'er Sheva says, Harav Baal Be'er Sheva Hiksha V'zel Lashona. This should be the final Mishnah. And he says, you know what you need now? You have to be very careful over here. What do you have to be careful with? You have to be careful with the vocalization of these words. You have to make sure you put in the correct nekudais. V'tzarech nagar ubar nagar. You need a carpenter, the son of the carpenter, the yafrakine, to take this one apart. What is the meaning of this? Meaning, not only do you need a Talmid Chacham, you need someone who the Torah is in their blood. Their father was a Talmid Chacham. Because this is such a difficult question. Why would Rabbi Yehuda compose the Mishnah that the second to last Mishnah is Hiratzain Sheyibane B'mher V'yameinu? By the way, this is not the only Masechta that near the end of the Masechta is a tefillah, Yehiratzain Sheyibane B'mhera V'yameinu, Perkei Avos. The second to last Mishnah of Perkei Avos. I think, if you look at the end of Parak, let's take a look very quickly. The end of Parak Hey, the second to last Mishnah of, actually the third to last Mishnah of Perkei Avos is Hu Hayaimer Az Panim Legehenam Ubaishes Panim Legan Eden Yiratzim Mafanecha Hashem Lekeinu Melkei Avosenu Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash Me'er Yameinu V'Sen Cholim B'Sarasecha. Then you go on to Ben Chamesh Shanim LaMikra, and then Ben Bag Oimer Hafach Ba V'Hafach Ba from Sara Agra. And again, it's very strange. Why is the third to last Mishnah of Perkei Avos Yiratzim Mafanecha Hashem Lekeinu Melkei Avosenu Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash Me'er Yameinu V'Sen Cholim B'Sarasecha? So, Rabbi say, there's a pasuk in Eicha. The pasuk says, Tavu v'aret shareha ibad v'shibar b'richeha malkaha v'soreh v'agoyim ein Torah. What is this pasuk saying? The pasuk says, Malka, her king, v'soreha, and her princes, v'agoyim, are among the goyim, ein Torah. Ein Torah. There is no Torah. There's no Torah. It doesn't say there's not so much Torah or there's a little bit of Torah. It says there is how much Torah? None. Zero. And zero is not a lot, right? So the Chidushe Hagra, the Vilna Gaon says like this. Says the Gra on Eicha. Says the Gaon on Perkei Avos. Listen to this. Kimashe kasav b'chol otzev yiyeh moisar v'kan tzarech loymar yiratzon sheyibane. Says the Vilna Gaon, there's a Torah Sofer in Mishnayos. The third to last Mishnah of Perkei Avos is not Yiratzim Avanecha Hashem Lekeinu Melkei Avosenu Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash Me'er Yameinu V'Sen Cholim B'Sarasecha. Says the Vilna Gaon, the last Mishnah of Perkei Avos is Yiratzim Avanecha Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash V'Sen Cholim B'Sarasecha. That is the last Mishnah of Perkei Avos. It doesn't say that in the Art Scroll. Says the Gra, it should be the last Mishnah of Perkei Avos. Also, the end of Tamid. In your Mishnayos, it's the second class, says the Gaon, the last Mishnah of Tamid, the last Mishnah of Avos is Hiratzain Milfanecha, Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash, V'Sen Chalkeinu. Why? Because Perkei Avos begins, what? Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. So everybody's getting all fluffy and all happy and ecstatic. Wow, Baruch Hashem, we were Makabel the Torah Sinai. So even though we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, we're in a grand old mood. Why? Because at least we have the Torah. Says the Vilna Gaon, not so fast. Ve'ein Torah b'loi Beis Hamikdash. There is no Torah without the Beis Hamikdash. Kimashe Kasav, like it says in Eicha, Malka v'sareha b'agoyim ein Torah. Her king and her minister are among the nations. There is no Torah. Therefore, as the conclusion to Perkei Avos, which begins Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, Perkei Avos ends. Once upon a time we had the Torah. Now we have zero Torah. Hopefully one day we'll get it back, like the pasuk says, Umala haaretz deya es Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. So the Vilna Gaon is Megala to us that if you want to know the correct order of Mishnah, both the last Mishnah of Tamid and the last Mishnah of Perkei Avos is a tefillah for the restoration of the Beis Hamikdash and a prayer that we should have Torah again one day. Rabbi say, this is a theme that the Vilna Gaon talks about at great length at great length. This is a common theme in the writing of the Gaon, that without the Beis HaMikdash, there is no Torah. For example, just as an aside, there is a tradition in the Sifrei Chasidus from the Baal HaTanya that even though once upon a time the greatest mitzvah was Torah, nowadays maybe it's tzedakah, which always troubled me because it's keneged the Messiah of the Talmud Torah, keneged kulam. But if you look in the writings of the Vilna Gaon, what's probably meant over here is as follows. The Gaon writes, Al shloisha dvarim ha'olam oimed. The world stands on three things. Al ha'Torah, ve'al avoda, ve'agmilas chasadim. The Gra writes, the only amud that has not been diminished through the Golos is the amud ha'chesed. Avoda, of course, is diminished. We don't have karbanos. Torah, of course, is diminished. Malka v'sareh b'agoyim ein Torah. The only amud that holds up the world today the way it always did was chesed. Meaning the madrega of chesed is not any different than it once was. So in that sense, chesed is in its pristine form. It has never been downgraded. Doesn't mean the zechus of chesed is a greater zechus than the zechus of Torah. But be it as it may, I want to show you one more gra. The gra says in his commentary to Mishlei, he says, Ki ein ha'ish b'veisai. There's no man who's in his house. Halach b'derech meirachaik. Therefore, tzrar hakesef lakach b'yadai. Wrap up the money, take it in your hand. Liyom hakesa yavai veisai. On the day that it's hidden, he'll come home. Says the Gra, Neged Chachma Amar, Ki ein ha'ish b'veisai, shebeis hamikdash charev, v'akadosh baruch hu eino shoichin v'tzion, shemisham ba hachachma. Tzrar hakesef lakach b'yadai hu neged Torah. Kiloymar sheha Torah chasuma achshav. The Torah is sealed, closed, shut. Even if you put in great effort, you won't attain it like once was. Why? Malka b'agoyim, Malka b'sareh b'agoyim, ein Torah. So that is a very startling statement. We don't have Torah. I mean, we have more Torah than ever. Baruch Hashem, we have Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, Talmud Bavli, you even have Art Scroll Yushalmi. I see people, they take these big green books off the shelf, they're doing Talmud Yushalmi. When I was a kid, I never saw anybody open up a Yushalmi. Now, people are done with Bavli already. Now, people, it's a Zoya, everything. What does it mean, Malka b'sareh b'agoyim ein Torah? Moira b'Rabbi, I want to draw your attention to a sefer and to a number of svarim that are b'chlal not known at all. And these are svarim of Rishonim, and it's kedai to be familiar with the names of them at least. There's something called the Sefer HaKrisais. Sefer HaKrisais was written by Rabbeinu Shimshon Mikinain, was one of the Balei HaTosfos. He corresponded with the Rashba. Rabbeinu Peretz said of Rabbeinu Shimshon Mikinain that he was the greatest Rishon of our generation. He was born in Chinon in 1260. In 1306, he leaves France during the Great Expulsion, and he passed away in 1330 in Marseille. Listen to what he writes. Va'aschil lefaresh zman amidas hatanam. Let me explain to you the period of the Tanoim. Me Hillel umi Shammai, from Hillel and Shammai shehein hamakablim. They were the ones who received the Torah Sheba'al Peh. V'hamakablim mehem ikar anshe hamishnah. And those who received from Hillel and Shammai were the primary men of the Mishnayos. Ki ad yemehem hayu sheish meos sidrei Mishnah. Until Hillel and Shammai, there were 600 orders of Mishnah. Got that? Not what they told you in yeshiva, that you need to learn Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Once upon a time, there were 600 Sidarim of Mishnah. So if it takes now 7 years to learn Daf Yomi, it used to take 700 years. People want to know, how come before Meir Shapiro started Daf Yomi, when was the last Siyum before then? I don't know, maybe 700 years before then. But says the Rishon, there used to be 600 Sidarim of the Mishnah. Until when? Until the Talmidim of Hillel and Shammai. Umiyameim, and from the time of Hillel and Shammai, Nismata HaTorah, the Torah was diminished. Mibnei HaGalas. V'loi tiknu ki'im shisha Sidarim mehem. By the way, there's a sefer called Seder Tanoim V'Amoraim. It's printed in the back of the Machzor Vitri. So I want to thank my friend Sal Orbach. He helped me find this a number of years ago. Now, by the way, how long did Hillel live before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash? 100 years before the Churban. So he lived. He was niftar approximately in the year 32 before the Common Era. So says the Sefer Seder Tanam V'Amaram Mimois Moshe V'Yad Hillel. This is talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, right? From Moshe until Hillel, Sheish Meyoi Sidrei Mishnah Havo. There were 600 Sidarim. Me Hillel Ve'elach He'eni Ha'olam. From Hillel and on, the world became poor. The Chosha Sarah Shal Torah, and the majesty of Torah weakened. V'lai tiknu me Hillel v'Shamai ela shishe Sidarim. V'hayu Anshe Mishnah. By the way, he points out from Hillel until Rabbi, was 310 years. By the way, there's another girsa of this sefer of Seder Tanam V'Amaram. He says from Moshe Rabbeinu. Amazing thing. From Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mishnah was given me Sinai. How many Sidarim were given me Sinai to Moshe Rabbeinu? Mi Moshe V'Yad Hillel Zakana Yushesh Meyo Sidrei Mishnah. Ke Moshe Nasan Yisrael Cholo Moshe. So you say, I don't know what this means. There are a lot of interesting things in the Rishonim. I never heard of the Sefer HaKrisos. My uncle never heard of it. My great-grandfather never heard of it. I don't know what it's doing. I never heard of Seder Tanam V'Amaram. My Rebbe told me there are 6 Sidarim in the Mishnah, so that's what I deal with. I'm not dealing with 600 Sidarim. Well, did you ever hear of Gemara, Shas? What I'm telling you is not just from the Rishonim, it's a Mefurish Gemara. The Gemara says explicitly in Masechta Chagiga and Daf Yudalid Amar Aleph. Bale Mishnah, Kagoin Rabbi Huda ben Temav Chaverav, Pligi ba Rapapa Rabbanan, Chad Amar, Sheish Me'os Sidrei Mishnah. The Gemara says this. One Amanda Amar says 600 Sidarim. V'chad Amar Shiva Me'os Sidrei Mishnah. So don't say, the Rishonim, Glatstein came up with the Rishon and nobody ever. No, it's a Gemara. 600 Sidarim. The Gemara in Chagiga Daf Yadal. Comes the Hiliga ben Yehoyada. Says Ben Yehoyada, what is the crowning jewel of a Jew? What is the keser of a Jew? Shas. Mamela, what do we wear on our heads? 2 shins. Shin is 300. Shin is 300. 600. What's 600? Sheish Me'oi Sidrei Mishnah. So you say, why is 1 shin 4? Because there's a man that Amar 700. There's a man that Amar 700. Says the Ben Yehoyada. That's the pshat. It used to be 600 sheish, but we, unfortunately, today we live with not the ksiv, we live with the kri. Sheish could be sheish me'os could be read sheish. In other words, instead of looking at the gematria of sheish, which are 2 shins, if you read it, sheish. In other words, we could look at the ksiv. The ksiv is shin shin, 600, or you could do the kri. The kri is sheish. Hashem said, no. V'halachtem emi bekeri. If you deal casual with me, afani elechem b'chamas kri. We're going to have to change the ksiv, says the Ben Yehoyada, to the kri. The kri is not shin shin. The kri is sheish. I'm going to diminish the Torah 1 out of 100. By the way, l'chol hadeos, chad is batel b'meya. So relative to the Torah that we used to have, we don't have a lot of Torah. We don't have a little Torah. How much Torah do we have? Malka v'sareh b'agoyim, ein Torah. There's no Torah. I don't know that Gemara. I never learned the Gemara in Chagiga. I stayed away because, they took that the Ma'aser Merkava near there, so I stayed away from Masechta Chagiga entirely. And Memela made a gzeira on the rest of... No. Who else says this idea? 600 Sidarim? I never heard of such a thing. The Shlah HaKadosh quotes the Sefer HaKrisos, word for word, that before Rebbe there were 600 Sidarim, and Rebbe was Makatzeret. Oh, now I get pshat in the first Mishnah in Masechta Psachim. Let's read the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Or larbas or boidkinas achametz or aner, komakom shen machnizim achametz in sarch bedika. And in the original version of the Mishnah, which was 100 times bigger than our condensed Cliff Note version, it had hundreds of pages about the Dinei Martev. Says Rabbi, Uva ma amru, and regarding what did they say to Shurais Martev? Who's the they? The original redactors of the Mishnah. Who are they? Klal Yisrael in the Midbar, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. That's the pshat in the Mishnah. Rabbi is being mekatzer. Uva ma amru, who's the they? The original recipients of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Says the Shla, look at number 20. V'zeh sheshaninu b'reish psachim lama amru shtei shuros b'amartev v'lei matzina b'mishnah didan anything about a martev. The answer is, you could be sure that in the original version of the Mishnah there was a lot of information about the martev, which was condensed, which was lost in the bitter galus, regarding which we had a tradition that it was there, and Rebbe therefore teaches what? Uva ma amru shtei shuros b'amartev. What? Chanukah, that what? That was lost then?
Because we have the same
Yeah, I mean, right, there's a question. Why is there no Masechta on Chanukah? There are different answers to that question. There is an answer that there was a Masechta Chanukah and it was lost. In fact, I believe the Vilna Gaon himself says that. Right. So maybe in the original Mishnah there was, there are a number of examples of this where there seems to be, it's clear that there was more information in an original edition. I'm going to give you a few more examples. Look at number 21 in the Shlah HaKadosh. Often in the Mishnah, and there are two examples of this. In Masechta Ksubos it says like this, and in Parak Ha'isha Shenas Armala, it says, V'm yesh lohem edim, afilu eved, afilu shivcha, harei elu ne'emanim. And then it says, She'ein adam ne'eman al yedei atzmai. The she, normally she means because of. It's a continuation. But in this Mishnah, it doesn't continue from anything. It's an independent idea. It should say, V'ein adam ne'eman, not She'ein adam ne'eman. Or another example, in the first Mishnah of Be'ah, it says, the Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, about shechting an animal on Yom Tif and covering up the blood. The Lashon in the Mishnah is, She'efer kira muchanhu. The ashes of an oven are prepared. And the Gemara asks, Efer kira man dachar shmei. So the Gemara says, no, it means V'efer kira. Well, if it means V'efer kira, then it should say V'efer kira. To which the Shlah says, no. In the original version of the Mishnayos, there were lines of Mishnayos that introduced these ideas to make the Sheh intelligible. When Rebbe condensed, so you'll say, when Rebbe condensed it, why didn't he switch the Shin with the Vav? Rebbe was not authorized to tamper the words. He was only authorized to condense the words. So even though the Sheh is unintelligible, but Rebbe understood that people would know that he's just removing words, and they have to understand this is a continuation of information that we don't have, it's not extant anymore. That's why often in Mishnayos, you'll have the Sheh, even though it's not the correct way. It did fit in the original edition, says the Shlah HaKadosh. Says the Sefer HaPliya. Look at number 22. The Sefer HaPliya, very interesting Sefer, was written by Rabbi Avigdor Kara, who passed away in 1439 in Prague. There's an old song. Now it's a Hasidic song, but it's not really a Hasidic song. Echad Yachid Umiyuchad. You ever hear that? Echad Yachid Umiyuchad. No, it's a Alta Niggin. So it was written actually by Rabbi Avigdor Kara, and the king Winchlas would have many religious conversations with Rabbi Avigdor Kara. Some attribute to him the Sefer HaKaneh, and he writes something very interesting. Let me just point out, Marav Rabbi Isai, a discrepancy between the Sefer HaKrisos and the Shlah. Because the Sefer HaKrisos said, when did the 600 go lost? Hillel and Shammai, right? Look at number 14. May Hillel v'Shammai. right? Ad Yemehem, until Hillel and Shammai, we had 600. That means until the year 32 before the Common Era, 100 years before the Churban. If you look in the Shla, looking at number 20 on the second line, he says, when did the 600 go lost? Shekoidem Rebbe. They got lost in the times of Rebbe. That's 310 years later. The Sefer HaPliya says an incredible thing. If you look at the end of number 22, he says, what's pshat in Chisurei Mechsara v'Hachi Katani? It's not chas v'shalom Rebbe accidentally left out words, or there's a mistake, or there's a printing error. Chisurei Mechsara means our Mishnah is missing words from the original text, and this is what it said. Not this is what it means to say. It doesn't mean to say that. Rebbe knew exactly, he wrote it deliberately, shorthand. Rebbe didn't make any errors. Rebbe was the greatest writer who ever lived. Rebbe was able to condense a work 100 times the size and condense it into something 100 the size and still contain all the essential ingredients. Chisurei mechsara, it's missing words. V'hachi katani, this is what it said, not this is what it means to say. That's pshan chisurei mechsara v'hachi katani. I don't know, I never heard of the Sefer HaPliya, I never heard of the Sefer HaKrisos, I never heard of Seder Amar V'tam, and I don't like, and Masech Chagig is not for me. Well, the Beis Yosef himself wrote a commentary, an amazing thing. He wrote a work on Klalei HaGemara. The name of the Sefer is Klalei HaGemara, and it's a parish on the Halichos Olam, and he quotes the Sefer HaKrisos, that there used to be 600 Siddharim of the Mishnah until Rabbi. Beis Yosef he got a hold of. Maran, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. By the way, there's another work on the Klalei HaGemara, on Halichos Olam, called Yavin Shmua. Yavin Shmua was written by Rav Shlomo Al-Gazi when Shabtai Tzvi began his ill-advised adventures in 1665. Rav Shlomo Al-Gazi was the first one who smelled him out and was against the Shabtai Tzvi. You ever hear something called a Brisa? Of course. You ever hear something called a Mishnah? Of course. You ever hear of something called a Tosefta? What's the difference between the three of them? I'll get back to you. What's the difference between a Mishnah, a Brisa, and a Tosefta? They're all very holy. Yeah, that we know. What is the difference? Says Rav Shlomo Al-Gazi, there used to be 600 Siddharim of Mishnah. A Brisa! How does a Brisa begin? Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Where do they teach? It's one of the ancient Mishnayos of the original 600 Siddharim of the Mishnah. What is a Tosefta? Tosefta is added information that never appeared in the 600. The difference between a Mishnah has remained as a Mishnah. A Brisa is from the original 600. That's why it starts Tanu Rabbanan. And Tosefta is information that never appeared into the 600. So, Rav Pinchas Friedman, by the way, a lot of the research for this year comes from one of the Mamarim of Shulei Pinchas on a Parshas Chukas, Tafshin Ayin. So he writes a beautiful remez. What's a Brisa? Something that once was in a 600. How does a Brisa introduced? Tanu Rabbanan. With which two ICIs? Taf, Reish, Begamatria, 600. Tanu Rabbanan. Where do the rabbis teach it? In the 600 Siddharim of the Mishnah. Marv Rabbi say, everybody agrees to this idea. Who's everybody? The Sefer HaKrisos, Seder Tanam Amoraim, the Gemara, the Ben Yoyada, the Shla, the Sefer HaPliya, the Klalei HaGemara, the Beis Yosef, Rav Shlomo Al-Gazi. The Chida and the Pesach Einayim on Chagiga just tries to reconcile the discrepancy. Well, when did the 600 go lost? Did it go lost in the times of Hillel in the year 32 before the Common Era, in the times of Hillel, or did it go lost 310 years later in the times of Rabbi? By the way, if you're still not satisfied that there really was 600 Sidarim in the Mishnah, let me just add, look at number 27, the Yalkut Ruveni in Parshas Yisroi quotes the Sefer HaKrisos that there, until the days of Hillel, there were 600 Sidarim of the Mishnah. The Rama Mipano in the Sefer Gilgulei Neshamas, he writes that Rabbi was a Gilgul of Mesushelach. They both taught 600 Sidarim in the Mishnah. By the way, there's an interesting Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni says that Mesushelach taught 900 Sidarim in the Mishnah. Now, what that means, that I can't, that you can't have everything. I don't know what that means. So you had to be there, right? Well, Hashem had the Torah, right? 974 generations before. Hashem was Mishta Davar Tziva LaElef Dar. That Hashem gave the Torah in the 1,000th generation. That means He had it 974 generations before the world was created. That's beyond the scope of today's shiur. So you say, I don't know, this is going back a long time, I don't know what the Gemara means, and all these Rishonim. Do any contemporary Gedolim speak about the 600 Sidarim of the Mishnah? Well, in the official biography of the Chafetz Chaim, from Rav Moshe Meir Yashar, he quotes an interesting encounter between two Ma'orei Olam, two great luminaries, the Chafetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Brisker. They once met Lepunduk Echad, and the following question was posed. We know that the Gemara says there used to be 600 Sidarim of the Mishnah, and now we only have Shisei Sidrei Mishnah, which is a fraction of what we used to have. So where is it? What happened to it? What happened to the other 594 Sidarim of the Mishnah? So the Chafetz Chaim would say, look at the shelf. The Rashi, the Tosfos, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, the Ran, Reb Kiva Eger, the Chassam Sofer, the Pnei Yoshua, the Maharsha, the Maram Shif, the Rashash, all the Rosh Yeshivas, the Granat, Reb Shimon Shkop, Reb Shlomo Haiman, Reb Baruch Ber, all the Rosh Yeshivas, they're restoring back from the original Shisha and Mishnah. In other words, from the original 600. In other words, in the original 600, you had maybe the Chakira of Reb Chaim, is it Din Din or Din Birur? You had all the Torah that we have today, Asoy Svarim in Kates. They're bringing back the original 600 Sidrei Mishnah. To which Reb Chaim Brisker responded to the Chafetz Chaim, not so fast. There's still a difference between what it says in the Mishnah and the Gemara and what it says in the Torah, the Rosh Yeshivas. What's the difference? That whatever it says in the Mishnah and Gemara, there's a rule, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. When Rosh Yeshivas have a machlokes, what's pshat in the Rambam? It's all Torah and it's all das Torah and we hold of it, but we don't necessarily apply the rule of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim in the sense that it's absolute Torah. The Rambam only meant one pshat. The Rambam didn't mean both Rabbi Chanan and Rabbi Baruch Ber. He could have only meant one of them. Okay, interesting conversation. But Moira Rabbi Sai, I am here today. I want to offer a third possibility. Because so far we have the Sefer HaKrisos says explicitly that until Hillel, we had 600 Sidrei Mishnah. That means we had 600 Sidrei Mishnah for the entire first Beis HaMikdash and the majority of the second Beis HaMikdash. The opinion of the Beis Yosef and the Shla, that until the times of Rebbe, we had 600 Sidarim of the Mishnah. I want to offer another pshat. So you say, Glatstein, what do you mean you want to offer another pshat? Who are you? What do you know? You don't know anything. You're going to offer a pshat. You have Rishonim, you have the Beis Yosef, you have the Shla, you have the Sefer HaKrisos. What other pshat could you offer? Where I come from, the yeshiva that I go to, have a great day. Where I come from, you can't argue with Rishonim, you can't argue with Achronim. In some yeshivas, the Pnei Yeshua says a pshat, and you could say a pshat. Where I come from, the Pnei Yeshua says a pshat, you can't say a pshat. Figure out what the Pnei Yeshua means. If you don't understand it, don't say your own pshat. Figure out why you're not understanding the Pnei Yeshua's pshat. But I'm offering a third possibility. Again, one possibility is like the Sefer Krisos writes that it was lost in times of Hillel. One possibility that it was lost later in times of Rabbi. The reason I'm offering another pshat is because I believe that the Vilna Gaon himself would offer another pshat. That if Mareinu Rabbeinu Eliyahu mi Vilna would walk into the room and we would ask the Gra, when were the 600 Siddharim of Mishnah lost? I believe the Gra would say, it was lost by Chorban Beis HaMikdash Harishain. Why? Why do I say that? Because the Gra keeps on saying, on the Pasuk, Malka v'sareha b'agoyim ein Torah. That upon the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, we don't have Torah anymore. And that's why we're mispalel. Yehi ratzon sheyibana Beis HaMikdash v'sein chalkeinu b'sarsa. Otherwise, what does the Gra mean that we used to have Torah and now we don't have Torah anymore? The only thing I could imagine that the Gra means is we used to have 600 Siddharim of the Mishnah, and with the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, it was lost. So you say, that's not really that strong of an evidence. I mean, the Gra does say that with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we lost Torah, but do we know for sure that the Gra means that when the Gra says we lost Torah, he refers to the losing of 594 Siddhara? Maybe he refers to something else. Rabbi say, I found an amazing thing. Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Who would know better than Reb Chaim Volozhiner what the Vilna Gaon holds? Reb Chaim Volozhiner, in his Hakdama to the Shnois Eliyahu, the Vilna Gaon wrote a commentary to Mishnah. It's called Shnois Eliyahu. And in the Shnois Eliyahu, in the Hakdama to the Shnois Eliyahu, says Reb Chaim, listen to these words, the Siyag HaTorah, the fence around the Torah, V'ikara, and its principal concepts, Hi HaMesoires HaNimsar Lanu Bal Peh, Uvishvil Zois HaTorah, Karas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Brisi Tanu. Listen carefully. On the third line, V'kivan Shagalu Yisrael, Malka V'sareha B'agoyim Ein Torah. Our kings, our officers are among the Gentiles. We don't have Torah. V'loi Koyin Hein Gavadnu. We're dead. Avadnu Tarsha B'al Peh. We don't have Tarsha B'al Peh. So listen carefully. Reb Chaim Volozhiner is quoting the same thing the Gra oft quotes, that we used to have Torah, but Malka v'Sareh b'Agoyim ein Torah. And then says Reb Chaim that we used to have 600 Siddharim of Mishnah, and now we only have 6. We used to have 600, now we only have 6. He says, from the times of Rabbi that he organized Shisha Siddur Mishnah, Kol Album, Kol Ataf Reish Sidrei Mishnah. So here you have it. Reb Chaim Volozhiner is writing explicitly that from the time of the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, from the time we were exiled, you know what it means, Malka v'Sareh b'Agoyim ein Torah? It means 600 to 6. So Reb Chaim is basically saying black and white, that when the Gra talks about the concept of Malka v'Sareh b'Agoyim ein Torah, he is referring to the diminution of the Torah from 600 to 6. Say, okay, that's a pretty good raya. After all, Reb Chaim Volozhiner was the student of the Gra. Who would know better than Reb Chaim what the Gra held? Rabbi say, there is one individual who would know what the Gra held even better than Reb Chaim. And that's the Gra himself. So I want to share with you and prove conclusively that it's the opinion of the Vilna Gaon that upon the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, when we say Malka v'Sareh b'Agoyim ein Torah, at that juncture in time, the Torah was diminished from 600 to 6. This is mamish Oyim v'Noira. It's kedai for the neshama to come downstairs to this world to hear this. Listen to this. No Torah. I mean, relative. It's a little. It's like batal. It's batal. In other words, negligible compared relative to. There's a pasuk in Zechariah. Vayomer Elai ma taroya. And the Malach said to me, Zechariah, what do you see? Vayomer ani, I said, Roya Megillah Afa. I see a flying scroll. Arka Esrim ba'ama, 20 amos long. V'rachva Eser ba'ama, and 10 amos wide. By the way, what's 20 times 10? 200. But it's a book. So that means one half is 20 by 10, the other half is 20 by 10. So the whole scroll in its entirety was 400. What was written on it? What was written on it? Says the Gemara in Eruvin. The Torah Shebal Peh was written on this document 20 amos by 20 amos. Ad Sheba Zechariah ben Idai Upiroshu Dechsiv Ayomer Lema Torah Vayomer Ani Roya Megillah Afa Arka Esram Arka Esrama V'chi Pashatet Allah, says the Gemara, when you spread it out, Esrim al Esrim. So I didn't make that up. The Gemara in Eruvin. Says the Gaon, Oyoy Menorah. That means what was written on a document? 20 amos by 20 amos, 400 amos square. What was written on it? Torah Shebal Peh. How big was the original Torah Shebal Peh? 600. So if 600 Sidarim, how big does the paper have to be? 400 amos. So how big is the paper of 6 Sidrei Mishnah? Dalet amos. Says the Gaon, this is what it means. Miyayim shacharav beis hamikdash ein loy lahakadosh baruch hu ela dalid amos shel halacha. Dalid amos shel halacha doesn't mean the area a person sits. A person doesn't sit in the area of 4 amos. Dalid amos shel halacha means we used to have 400 amos of halacha, meaning a document the size of 400 amos squared. But now, Malka v'sarab hagoyim ein Torah, says the Gaon, from the time the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we don't need 400 amos, we only need 4 amos to contain the Torah Shebal Peh. Is a raya brura that the Vilna Gaon holds that upon the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the 600 Sidarim went lost. Says, look at number 34. Hadenaktu Chazal, Arba amos shel halacha. Ma inyan dafka arba amos. Says the Gaon based on the Gemara in Eruvin. We know the Torah Shebal Peh is Rechava Mitzvah Ma'od. And how big was it? It was written on a document 20 by 20. Say Chazal shebetchila yoshesh me'asirei Mishnah. And if it was written on 400, that means every Amma was a Seder and a half. So nowadays that we have Shishe Sidrei Mishnah, so bediktuk, this is what it means. Ein loy lahakadosh baruch hu ba'olamai ela arba amos halacha. So upon the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, we only have 4 amos. Why? That means the Gaon is saying that what happened with Churban Beis Hamikdash, we lost from the 600, it went down to 6. Now, I really, honestly, I believe there's no machlokes over here. There are different levels of fading. So we originally had 600. We suffered a terrible blow upon the Churban that maybe to the degree that we used to have the 600, 594 were lost to some extent. And probably even more dramatically upon the demise of Hillel. And even more and then completely from times of Rabbi. So I don't know that it's a real machlokes. It's Eilu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. But the point is that in order to know Torah, understand Torah, have Torah, we need a Beis HaMikdash. And therefore we're mispalel. Yiratzayin mofanecha sheyibana Beis HaMikdash mher v'yaminu. What does it mean v'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha? That we literally were reeling from a lack of Torah knowledge. So we hope we're mispalel. When Chazal say chesur mechsar hachi katani, it means this is what it used to say. When it says in the beginning of Psachim, Uvama omru beishuras b'marte, because there's a longer edition. A brisa is something that was taught in the original 600. A tosefta is something that was taught out of the 600. We should taka be zoicha that nowadays we have the Dalet Amos Shel Torah. We should be zoicha to the binyan Beis Hamikdash. Yiratzim ofanecha sheyibana Beis Hamikdash v'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.